Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us this evening, particularly those who are coming for the first time from our last session. This is the second in this series, but certainly if you missed the first one, no problem at all. You'll be able to pick up very, very quickly. Our session really has evolved as I first spoke with the Office for the New Evangelization in our diocese and said, what can we do? And I mentioned this at Mass on Sunday. How do we bridge, or build that bridge between faith and culture, particularly with our young people? And I think all of us, even us at table tonight, Oscar and Dave and Julie and of course Jonathan, we're all struggling with this. How do we build that bridge between the faith that we love and we know is so central and important in our life and the culture in which we live and our children are being raised in and exposed to? And so this is the fruit of that dream and hope, was putting together on the ground level here in Falmouth that need, expressing that need, and then turning to the diocesan office to say, help us, what can we do? And so we're very pleased this evening to have Oscar Rivera, who is the Director of Youth Ministries, or they have a lot of titles now, long beyond their titles. They're hardworking people in that office, and it's been great to have a diocesan office that we can turn to when we have a situation like we have right now. And we said, help us, how can we reach out to our parents and help their children? And of course, you might recall Dave Cavallo, who was here, those of you who were here last time, Dave led the session. So we're very happy to have them both back this evening, and I'd just like to begin with a prayer, and then they'll take it from here. Almighty God, we gather this evening so much aware of your presence in our life and the difference of that presence, that transformative presence is to us, to our families. And we ask that this evening, Lord, you might open our hearts so that we might see how we, in small way, can contribute to building that bridge between the faith we love and the culture in which we live. Bless our efforts this evening, particularly we do this for your children, for our children, as we offer this prayer together using the words that Jesus has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Who's up? Dave?
Well, good evening. Good to be back. Good to see you again. For those of you who weren't here last time, my name is David Cavallo. And I just work at the head of evangelization. Like Monsignor says, our titles don't matter much. We basically say our job is to tell people who don't want to know about Jesus. And that's, I think, the beauty of our mission elsewhere. But before we begin, I actually want to call Oscar to introduce himself. In the last week, you met Deacon Chris Paul, who works in our office as Director of Child and Adult Discipleship. Next week, Oscar will be here with Irina. I will not be here, and Irina is our Director of Family and Respect Life. So you actually get to meet our team over the course of 3 weeks. So I just want to let Oscar introduce himself. So give a round of applause for Oscar Rivera.
All right. Well, you know my name. My official title is Director of Youth Ministry, working with ages or grades 6 through 12. I came to the office just because I have a real zeal for the youth, especially where they're at now. The pandemic kind of did a lot of people in, but prior to the pandemic, we're seeing the signs of the youth slowly backing away from the faith. So my hope, today is to give you guys some tips on to how to basically handle that, but at the same time, I'm here to be that crazy uncle that injects a little bit of hope in times where people are thinking these kids are going nowhere. So you'll get that during the talk. And I'm a little bit more like on the crazy side, but I'll let him get all statistical with all of that.
Thank you, Oscar. Oscar is really a true blessing to our office and to our diocese. He's coming to us from Virginia, where he's originally from Worcester. So we're really glad he's with us in our team. Someone has to wear the tie, so that's I guess me. So wonderful. So for those of you who weren't here last time, what we want to do is just give a brief recap of the last session. So the last session we discussed the general art of how to even engage in conversation. How do you engage in conversation with people in general? And while I think the original purpose was especially for our children and grandchildren, I think we can safely assume people in many ways. We all know that person in the back of our mind who we just wish we could get to come to church. We just wish to believe again, right? So maybe keep that mind, that person, in the back of your mind. And then we use as our intro subject the idea of God and suffering. I'm not going to go into that tonight. We had a handout that it's like your cheat sheet in case you fall asleep. So you can certainly get that in the recordings from Jonathan. We have here again, by where Monsignor is sitting, another cheat sheet for specifically tonight on what we're going to cover. So again, if my pink tie isn't enough to keep you awake, the handout is there for your help there. And we'll have some other information we'll share with you about. So that'll be it. So we'll hop right into it. So real quick, we talked about, well, how do you engage in the art of conversation with young people, grandchildren, anyone in general? And the reality is, there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done first before an actual conversation even happens, right? There has to be, if you've ever read Sherry Weidell's Forming Intentional Disciples, which has kind of been for a very long time the kind of hallmark book on evangelization. She talks about the different stages of conversion. And one of the initial ones is initial trust, which leads to initial curiosity, which only then leads to seeking. So there's about several stages of just curiosity and seeking and trust before we get anywhere else. One of my favorite stories in Scripture is, I believe it's the calling of Andrew, either Andrew or his brother. And the reason why he followed Jesus is because, Jesus said to him, I saw you standing on the fig tree. In other words, Jesus using his abilities sees him underneath the fig tree even though there's no one around. And that's what got him to believe. There's an initial kind of trust relationship that first needs to be built. So what's the biggest piece of laying the groundwork? There's two very big pieces that all the sociological data actually points to. Number one is not the parish, nor is it the school, nor really is it any other facet of society that proves to be effective in religious transmission. It is time and time again the family. It is time and time again parents. And what are the two biggest hallmarks? Well, Christian Smith, as I mentioned before, said there's really two main hallmarks when it comes to successful religious transmission. After studying families for decades in the country, he found there's really two big hallmarks to those kids who were able to have the faith successfully transmitted to them that their parents exhibited. Number one, and I'll stand out of the way so you can see, it was parents that not only walked the walk, but also talked the talk, that shared their why, for why they're a disciple, why they go to church, why they believe. So in other words, it's not simply enough to teach the points of the catechism. Do your kids know your journey? Do your grandkids know your journey and why you go to church, why you believe, why you do any of this? The second part of it is the kind of relationship, the kind of parenting relationship. So one that implements clear life standards and expectations with relational and emotional warmth. What I would simply define as a family with a really strong identity. In other words, if you were to go home to your family and say, in our family, we do X, could they finish the sentence? It's not like, we go out and we eat, but rather, who are we as a family? It's very clear the expectations, very clear the standards, and it's very clear that we're a very tight-knit group. And they found if you're able to build that bond and share your why consistently, persistently, that is a very big leg way up. However, some of you, even in this room, might be saying, well, I did that. And some of my family still doesn't go to church. And part of that is because it really does take a village. And this is where the second point from last talk that we want to bring back up is this. That, especially with young people, it's been found, remember, we talked our generational terms, Generation Z, which, for those who are here, really is a wide range from, some say as early age 6, 7, to about 24, is that when you have 5 or more trusted adults in your life, not only does your mental and your social emotional health drastically improve, but your ability to, again, experience faith transmission is very high. So in other words, what are some of the groundwork we need to have? We need to have parents who not only walk the walk, but talk the talk and share their why. Families have strong identities with relational warmth and clear expectations and standards. And a community of 5 or more trusted adults that this child can turn to, especially in matters of the faith. And to this end, we talked about, all right, so then how do you engage in that conversation? And I pointed out, I believe it was John 4, Jesus meeting the woman at the well, and how he engages in that. And I won't spend too much time with sharing about that story in John's Gospel. I encourage you to read and meditate upon the self. But here you have a woman who is really rejected by her village. Jesus meets her where she is, at the well. He doesn't automatically engage in what he wants to tell her, but rather takes time to listen to her story, to what she has to share, to her questions. And only then, after building that initial trust, did he speak truth into that situation. You know, there are individuals who pointed out the idea of, well, when can I finally say my point? And the concern is, we love these people so much that we want to get to our point. But it's the classic example, again, of the parable of the sower and the seed. You know, you have to evangelize like you garden. You know, this past summer we had a drought, and I also made a lot of mistakes in the garden. I'll just leave it at that. And to the point where, how many of you have tomatoes? You grow tomato plants in your garden? Have your tomato plants at the bottom ever produced a myriad of warts? Just me? So I mean, if you want to use the other parable of the sower, use David and his tomatoes, and where if you don't follow the right steps and you try to rush it, you know, I was all into like organic stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do organic stuff, and like I get this pack of like, you know, the seaweed. It's all about the seaweed and the fish stuff, whatnot. And it's this little packet that comes from Amazon. And I'm just like, oh, this must be it. Maybe you buy a couple of years. So I put it into water, and I pour the whole thing all over. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have all these tomatoes. And then I read the fine print, and it was like, this is your concentrate that you then dilute over 5 gallons of water and use for the course of your entire summer. And I was like, with a hose out at 9 o'clock at night, please, drink, tomato plants, drink. And, you know, warts, you know, came out of it. So that's the opposite of the parable of the sower, is David and the tomatoes. So in other words, in our urgency, in our desire to want to just, I love you so much, and when you love someone, you want them to know, and then you put the tomatoes before the horse, you put your seaweed fertilizer before the tilling of the soil, and then, you know, your people trying to evangelize get warts. I don't know. It doesn't work out. If they do, call someone else. Don't call me. That'd be weird. But that's kind of the main points we certainly want to draw from this, is in our families, do we share our why? Do we have emotional warmth? Do we have a village? Do we take the time to build initial trust, initial curiosity before we make our points? Sound good? Any questions on that? Awesome. Great. You're doing better than my tomatoes. So the next point, so we talked about our topic being, you know, why go to church? The $1 million question. That we can have everyone in the pew. We can be that church. Everyone's going to Mass. And you can probably already tell that my answer is not going to be that simple. Right? But that's what we desire. We hope for the second coming, the parousia, when every pew shall be filled. That's actually not the vision Jesus gave us, but hey, close enough. Well, we did some digging ourselves, and this is how much I care for Monsignor. You are the first people you're going to see this information in the diocese. Very first people. During the whole synodal process, we actually did a little market research and put out a survey to target audience across our region. What that meant is we were guaranteed to have a population, and guaranteed to have population of non-practicing and non-Catholics. Answer the questions, because you have the hardest population to get to answer any churchy kind of survey. So you're the first people. That's what I do for Falmouth. All right, so to give you a little context in terms of the survey, so the way it was designed to be efficacious was you would first share, there's other questions, but for our purposes of Mass, you would share your religious practice. If you were a weekly Mass-going Catholic, if you were Catholic but you weren't really practicing, if you were non-Catholic, a different Christian or different religion. And based off what you answered, you got a different track of questions. Because we understood that if you weren't really churchy language probably isn't going to work for you. So I share that because the data I'm about to share with you is from the non-practicing non-Catholics. All right, so this is not your weekly going Sunday mass goers, okay? Just for context. There's various questions we asked them, but for the pertinence of tonight's conversation, the main question I'm going to show you is, why do you not go to church? Was one of the questions, or we didn't frame it quite that way. But basically, why don't you go to church? Let's see the main reasons that they give. I'm going to stand off here to the side. My apologies if I'm out of screen. So, number one reason, so they could also pick more than one. So they could put multiple. So these percentages add up to more than 100, right? So you could pick multiple. Number one reason, almost 37% said, I had a change in circumstances that made it harder to attend. Ergo, change in work, health, family situation that made it difficult to attend. Second most common reason, about 26%, I don't feel attending church matters. Okay? These were pre-selected options, okay, so you're aware. About 17% said, I moved away from the church I had been attending. Okay? About 11% said, my beliefs in God or religious practice changed. And about 10% said, I do not believe in the views of my church. There's a couple of the reasons for about 5 or 7% less, right? And I'm going to come back to this. But actually more than the last two was 12% was other reasons. I'm going to share the majority of those here with you. Okay, 12% said other. This is their exact words, by and large, except for grammatical errors that I fixed. So the first one, I feel almost embarrassed. Right? There's no context, just simply, I feel almost embarrassed. There were several responses that to some effect said, I don't have time to go. Here's what they came down to. One, I'm not sure what I believe. They're not convenient in terms of time to attend. So I'm assuming in terms of church times, the times are not convenient for them to attend. So probably similar to the response right before it. I think of the church now as more of a business. I can pray at home. I pray at home. So you'll see that's another kind of response, is a feeling that if I can just pray at home, I don't need to go to church. The Catholic Church's handling of the abuse, I put crisis, they just said abuse, but I had crisis, I'm assuming that is what they're referring to. I stopped with the pandemic. Life change and new reflection. I don't need church to pray or love God. I don't believe in organized religion. I still believe in those beliefs, I'm assuming that being of Christian or Catholic Church. If I don't think I need a church to show me how, I already know to be a good person and I don't need a constant reminder. My church was sold. And transport, I put Asian, because I think that's what they're referring to, is a lack of transportation to church. Now, this is very interesting, and I'll get down to kind of what the breakdown is on this. And I'm going to come back and forth between a few slides. If you think about all those answers, you could really lump them into two categories. The first one is, the principal reason of stop going to church is transitions in life. Time doesn't work anymore. My life changed, health, work, family situation, the pandemic. Right? There were life transitions. And the interesting thing about that is, our temptation as Catholics at the time could be like, if they only knew what we taught, they would believe and come here. And I want to show you that almost 50%, 43%, has nothing to do with belief, but rather simply state of life. What I would call transitions in life. It's interesting. There's, a reason why the church calls us to Sunday worship. And I mean, there's deep scriptural roots. All going back from, when people say, where is it in the Bible? Start in Genesis and in Revelation. It's pretty much in every book, the desire to give right worship to God. But there's a reason why the Lord in His wisdom built and called us to weekly worship. And part of it is this. I am the quintessential best consumer and card holder at Planet Fitness. I am the person they love. You want to know why they love me? I got a black card that I haven't used in 3 years. It's $20 each month. It's just enough to not make you want to cancel it. And then here's the thing, they got great deals when you sign up, and then you got to cancel in writing. It's not easy. There's no button, you can just do it. And I'm like, I'm not writing to my senator. Why do I need to write a letter to, to cancel my Planet Fitness membership. I'm like, here we go. And then every month I see it, and it's like that nudge. And then you lie to yourself, right? You start justifying, well, I'm going to go. That's just when COVID ends. Once COVID ends, I'll start going. I could use it, and then you make another reason, make another reason. You see what I'm painting here, right? There's a muscle memory in us. There's a habit that we need. And the Lord knows that. It's quite simple. And people say, well, I don't need to go to church to be a good person. And Oscar's going to get into more of some of these reasons as well. But imagine if I apply that to myself. I don't need to go to the gym to be skinny. You can look at me and say, how's that going? Things could be worse, but it just, here we are. So what then is the other right here? So 47% is really about a belief or perception of belief. Right? So as Catholics, and I'm going to assume everyone here is a practicing Catholic who believes in what the church teaches, right? We are motivated by probably various different reasons what the church teaches, especially because of the Eucharist. Right? Body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. I mean, when I go to church, the music could be terrible, the preaching could be terrible, the person next to me could smell, but, the Eucharist is there. And I'm going to go no matter what. And so we assume, well, if I just tell everyone that, not that they smell, but about the Eucharist, right? If I just tell them the wonders of what the Eucharist is, they're going to go. This Thursday I have a doctor's appointment. I already know what he's going to... when you go to your physical, you already know what they're going to say. Right? It's like you sit in there and you're like, doctor, you know what you're going to say. You know what I'm going to say. We both know what our blood pressure is. Can we just sign the dots and move along and just say that we did this so my insurance is happy? And not make this feel too guilty. Sometimes I go to confession, I feel the same way. Like, Father, here again, it's kind of that feeling of the doctors. And he'll sit there, and he's a very nice doctor, and he'll say, you're increased for high blood pressure, and you're going to be increased rates for diabetes, and in 10 years, man, you're young. And then you get slightly motivated, right? I'll eat a little better. I'll throw a cucumber into my popsicle. I'll try to add just a little bit of green, iceberg lettuce. That's healthy, right? I'll do enough just so I don't die, right? Just so that I can see my children's children. But I'm probably not going to actually go down a couple pant sizes, right? So let's flip it back now to this idea of Mass. Like, why is it ultimately important? It's our salvation. Like in many ways, so Jesus did win our salvation on the cross. And the sacraments flow from that cross. And if you want the surest way to get to heaven and avoid hell, which yes, both are very real, then receive the sacraments, live a life of grace. You won't get high blood pressure, diabetes in the spiritual life. And you'll make it to heaven. You'll avoid death, spiritual death. And that's got to be enough to change people's minds. Well, think about it from my perspective, and probably will be an awkward... If you're, praying around 10 o'clock on Thursday, just kind of keep me in mind. All right? It's not going to... Just like it wouldn't change that awkward encounter, the reality is that matters to us because we believe that. It matters to us because we believe heaven and hell are real. We believe salvation is needed. To someone who doesn't believe that, they're going to be like me at my doctor, who now I'm going to be thinking about this talk while he's telling me these things. And saying, yeah, and I got to eat more than a piece of iceberg lettuce. So what will help me? Well, I thought about this. I said, well, I'm really impressed by Bishop Acuna. I'll show you what I mean. The way the chancery is set up, we're different buildings, and our building's right across from different buildings, and his house is there. And periodically in the evening, if I'm leaving late, which is a lot of times, I'll see him go on walks. And I'm like, this guy's like, no offense, Bish. This guy's old enough to be like, my father. And he's probably in better shape than I am. And I'm like, I should probably start walking. Right? Or a much more real piece of it, right? I'm running around, I have 3 kids, as I mentioned. I'm running around with my 5-year-old, he plays soccer now Saturday mornings. And then I realized, I am not that old to not be able to do this. Right? And it's being able to see that functionality, that lived experience, and I'm like, I really should lose some weight. It's not my doctor's my doctor's trying to make me feel bad. He's a great guy. it's going to be that lived experience of it that's going to make me be like, you know, I might just need to kind of change my lifestyle. What am I getting to? Let me show you this point. There was another question that says, what is your relationship with Jesus like? 54% said, I believe Jesus existed, but that he's not God. 30% said, I believe in Jesus, and then they said, the answer was, I believe in Jesus, that Jesus is God, and my relationship with him is X, and they go on to our relation. And 60% said, I don't believe Jesus existed. So that means about 70% of non-practicing Catholics, non-Catholics, and so yes, there are also non-Christians in this, but I didn't show you the overall data. They're actually the minority of the answers. Okay, the bulk of this is non-practicing Catholics and non-Catholic Christians. 70% don't believe Jesus is divine. How can you start a conversation on the real presence of the Eucharist when you don't even believe in Jesus and we believe him to be? See what I'm getting at here? There's a bigger issue here, a bigger question in relationship that we need to tackle before we get into, well, you need to go to church. Why? It doesn't matter to me. Makes a lot more sense when you don't even believe Jesus is God. Or I don't have a relationship with him. Okay, a lot more tilling we need to do to the soil. A lot more conversation we need to have before we start on apologetics of, you need to go to Mass because. Okay, makes sense? So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Oscar, and he's going to dissect that portion just a little bit.